The Virgin's Testament, Blood and Linen, 1501. Catherine of Aragon's wedding night. She's 16, terrified, and about to produce evidence that will echo through history for 30 years. Blood-stained sheets, inspected by witnesses, carefully preserved as proof she was a virgin. Fast forward to her divorce trial, she dramatically presents those same stained linens to the court. But here's the thing nobody talks about. Medieval women knew something. Those bloodstains, they might not prove what everyone thought they proved. Tonight, you're learning their secret. Welcome to Hearts and History. I'm so glad you're here tonight. Get comfortable, dim the lights, maybe grab your favourite blanket. We're diving into one of history's most intimate secrets. If this kind of content helps you unwind, hit subscribe. It really helps the channel grow. And drop a comment letting me know where you're listening from and what time it is. I love seeing our community span time zones. Ready? Let's discover why medieval women kept vials of animal blood hidden in their jewellery. Picture this scene. November 1501. Ludlow Castle. Catherine of Aragon, fresh off the boat from Spain, is about to marry Prince Arthur. She's got no idea this marriage will last 4 months before Arthur dies, or that she'll spend the next 8 years fighting to marry his younger brother Henry, or that this one night, this one moment of producing bloody sheets, will become the centerpiece of a trial that splits England from Rome. But right now, she's just a scared teenager who knows exactly what's expected. The bloody sheet tradition wasn't unique to England. This was happening across medieval Europe. Jewish communities, Christian kingdoms, Muslim territories, everyone was obsessed with proving virginity through blood. The logic seemed simple. Virgin brides had intact hymens. First intercourse tears the hymen. Torn hymen bleeds. Blood on sheets equals proof. Except, and this is where it gets interesting, medieval women knew this whole system was medically ridiculous. They'd figured out ways around it generations before Catherine's wedding night. Think about the stakes here. No blood on those sheets. Marriage annulled immediately. Bride returned to her family in disgrace. Dowry forfeited. Future marriages impossible. Her entire life destroyed because of what? Anatomy she couldn't control. Maybe she had an elastic hymen that stretched instead of tearing. Maybe she was born with minimal hymenal tissue. Modern medicine tells us about 50% of women don't bleed during first intercourse, but medieval physicians didn't know this. Or if they did, nobody cared. So women adapted. They created an underground network of knowledge, passed from mother to daughter, from married women to nervous brides. The most common trick? Animal blood. Chicken blood worked perfectly, so did pig blood. Sheep blood, any fresh animal blood, looked identical to human blood on white linen. A bride would hide a small vial in her jewellery, maybe in a locket, or sewn into her nightgown. Then, in the dark confusion of the wedding night, she'd discreetly apply it where it needed to appear. Medieval medical texts actually document this trick. Physicians complained bitterly about false virgins who used chicken blood to deceive honest husbands. One 15th century doctor was particularly annoyed about dishonest midwives who, for payment, declare whores to be virgins and provide them with chicken blood. This wasn't some rare secret. It was widespread enough that male authorities knew about it and couldn't stop it. Women had created a system of mutual protection that operated completely outside male control. Other methods existed too. Some women timed their weddings to coincide with their menstrual periods. If you're bleeding anyway, blood on the sheets was guaranteed. Riskier women used sharp implements, small needles or pins to prick the vaginal walls and cause controlled bleeding. Dangerous in an era without antibiotics, but desperate times called for desperate measures. The fact that these methods appear in both medical texts and comic literature shows everyone knew about them. What's brilliant about the chicken blood method is how it exploited the system's weaknesses. Inspections happened in poor lighting, dawn, or candlelight. Visual color assessment was nearly impossible. Examiners looked for blood in the right location, but couldn't perform chemical analysis. Once blood was confirmed present, questions rarely continued. Women understood the verification process better than the men who designed it. They found every gap and exploited it with remarkable ingenuity. Back to Catherine. Those sheets she preserved for 30 years, were they authentic evidence of her torn hymen, or carefully applied chicken blood from a terrified 16-year-old who understood the game she was playing? We'll never know. What we do know is that she understood the power of those stained linens. She kept them for 3 decades, then presented them in court as legal documents, physical evidence of her virtue and her marriage's legitimacy. Whether real or fabricated, they nearly worked. Medieval women lived under impossible standards. Their bodies were public property requiring verification. Their sexual history was scrutinized while men's never was. But they weren't passive victims. They shared knowledge, developed workarounds, protected each other. The chicken blood trick represents female solidarity in the face of patriarchal control. Tonight, as you drift off, think about those clever women hiding vials of blood in their jewelry, outsmarting a system that tried to own them. Sleep well knowing those days are behind us. The inheritance obsession, the power of bloodlines. Here's something that'll blow your mind. Medieval society didn't obsess over virginity because they were prudes. They obsessed over it because of money, property, titles, land. Think about it. If you're a lord with a massive estate, you need to know your heir is actually your heir. No DNA tests back then. The only way to guarantee paternity, make absolutely sure your wife had never been with another man. That blood-stained wedding sheet wasn't about morality, it was about inheritance law. This gets wild when you realise the stakes. We're talking about entire kingdoms changing hands based on legitimacy of bloodlines. A duke's bastard son gets nothing. His legitimate son inherits everything. So proving your wife was a virgin when you married her, that's not romantic. That's legal documentation. The wedding night bloodstain became Exhibit A in court cases that could determine who controlled vast fortunes. Catherine of Aragon literally presented her bloody wedding sheets as evidence in divorce court 28 years later. Medieval canon law made this even more complicated. A marriage wasn't legally binding until it was consummated. You could have the biggest wedding ceremony in Europe, but if you didn't have sex, the marriage could be annulled. No consummation meant no marriage. No marriage meant no legitimate heirs. So that bloodstain had to prove 2 things. The bride was a virgin, and the marriage was now legally complete. Both families needed that evidence, or everything fell apart. The Bible gave this tradition religious authority that made questioning it almost heretical. Deuteronomy chapter 22 describes exactly this scenario. A man accuses his new wife of not being a virgin. The girl's parents have to produce the blood-stained cloth as proof of her purity. If they can't, she gets stoned to death. Medieval Christians knew this passage by heart. It wasn't just cultural tradition anymore. It was God's law. You don't argue with Scripture. The mechanics varied wildly across Europe. In some places, the mothers inspected the sheets privately at dawn. In others, the bloody sheet got hung from a window for the whole village to see. Spanish families would cut out the stained section and save it for decades. Imagine keeping your daughter's bloody wedding sheet in a chest for 30 years, just in case you needed legal proof later. That's exactly what happened with Catherine of Aragon. Social class changed everything about how this played out. Noble families had witnesses waiting outside the bedroom door. Peasant families might just check the sheet the next morning. Rich brides had elaborate nightgowns and ceremony. Poor brides had, well, whatever they could manage. But the expectation was the same across every level of society. Blood on the sheet or your marriage was suspect. No blood meant potential annulment, returned dowry, and social destruction. Here's where medieval medicine completely screwed this up. They believed every woman was born with an intact hymen that would tear and bleed during first intercourse. No blood meant she'd already had sex, or something was physically wrong with her. This theory seemed logical, except it was medically nonsense. But they didn't know that, so women got judged by a biological standard that was fundamentally flawed from the beginning. Modern medical research shows roughly 50% of women don't bleed during first intercourse. Some women are born with barely any hymenal tissue. Others have elastic hymens that stretch instead of tearing. Some have thick hymens that tear but don't bleed much. Medieval physicians had no clue about this variation. They created a test for virginity that failed half the time through no fault of the woman being tested. But here's where women got brilliant. They knew about the bloodstain requirement years before their wedding nights. Knowledge passed from mothers to daughters, older wives to younger brides. And they figured out tricks. The most common? Chicken blood. Medieval households slaughtered animals regularly for food. A small vial of fresh chicken blood, hidden in jewelry or hair, could be discreetly applied to the sheet in the dark confusion of the wedding night. Women got creative with their resistance. Some timed their weddings to coincide with their periods. Natural blood, right where it needed to be. Others used sharp implements to intentionally cause bleeding they could control. Dangerous, yes, but desperate times. Medieval medical texts explicitly mention these tricks, complaining about false virgins who used chicken blood to deceive honest husbands. If doctors were writing about it, the practice was widespread. Think about this as you drift off. Medieval women hiding chicken blood in lockets, waiting for their wedding night to fake evidence that would determine their entire future. They were outsmarting a system designed to control them, using the only power they had, knowledge shared between women. Some were protecting themselves from biology they couldn't control. Others were claiming sexual freedom men automatically enjoyed. Either way, they were fighting for their survival. The night of deceit, inspecting the bloody sheets. Dawn breaks after the wedding night, but for medieval brides, sleep was impossible, because in a few hours, strangers would examine the most intimate evidence of what happened in that bed. The blood-stained sheet, or lack thereof, would determine everything. Her honour, her family's reputation, whether the marriage would even continue. Here's what's wild about this whole system. Medieval women knew it was flawed. They knew hymens don't always bleed, and they had a plan. Picture this. The sun's barely up. The bride's mother enters the chamber, followed by the groom's mother, sometimes other female relatives. They're looking for one thing: red stains on white linen. Medieval household manuals treat this like a routine inspection. Check the colour, check the pattern. Make sure it's centered where the bride's body would have been. Fresh blood, not something planted earlier. These women were experienced. They knew what to look for, and they were suspicious of trickery. When adequate blood appeared, celebrations exploded. Church bells would ring in some villages. The stained sheet might be hung from a window, a public announcement that everything was proper. The bride's honour confirmed. The groom's masculinity proven. Both families could breathe easy. Their alliance was secure. The bloodstain served as proof on two critical points. The bride had been a virgin, and the marriage was now legally consummated. Medieval law required both for legitimacy, but no blood. Instant crisis. The groom could demand immediate annulment. The bride's family faced accusations of fraud. Court records are packed with cases where missing bloodstains triggered legal battles. The bride would be subjected to physical examination by midwives, invasive, humiliating procedures to determine why she didn't bleed. If they found what they considered evidence of prior intercourse, she'd be returned to her family in disgrace. Dowry forfeited, marriage prospects destroyed, her life basically over. Medieval women weren't passive victims though. They had networks, knowledge passed from mothers to daughters, older married women sharing secrets with younger brides. They knew about the bloodstain requirement years before their wedding nights, and they knew tricks. This information circulated through oral tradition that left few written traces. Male physicians complained about it constantly, but couldn't stop it. Women protected women. They had each other's backs in ways that would save lives and reputations. The most common trick: animal blood. Medieval households slaughtered chickens, pigs, sheep regularly for food. Fresh blood was always available. A bride would collect a few tablespoons, hide it in a small vial, maybe concealed in jewelry, in hidden pockets, even in her hair. During the wedding night, in darkness and confusion, she'd discreetly apply blood to the sheet. Medieval medical texts explicitly described this method. It was common knowledge. One 15th century physician complained bitterly about, quote, false virgins using chicken blood. Other methods existed too. Some women timed weddings to coincide with menstruation. If she was having her period, blood on sheets appeared naturally. Medieval women tracked cycles carefully and could request specific dates. Risky though, menstrual blood might look different. Some used sharp implements, needles, pins, to cause controlled bleeding. Dangerous in an era without antibiotics, but desperate women did it. These weren't random tricks. They were sophisticated strategies based on understanding the system's vulnerabilities. Not all deception succeeded. Some husbands suspected trickery and demanded verification. Midwives would examine the bride immediately after the wedding night. Some claimed they could tell human from animal blood by colour or consistency, though modern medicine says that's nearly impossible by visual inspection. But the threat of expert examination deterred some women. Getting caught meant even worse consequences than no blood at all: fraud charges, complete social destruction. So the stakes were incredibly high. Here's what's fascinating. Some midwives were accomplices. 15th century physician Niccolo Falcucci complained about, quote, dishonest midwives who for payment declare whores to be virgins and provide them with chicken blood. An underground economy existed. Women helping women navigate a system designed to control them. Female solidarity trumping male authority. These weren't isolated cases. This was organized resistance. A shadow network operating right under the noses of husbands, fathers, and church officials who created these impossible standards. The psychology here is complex. A woman using chicken blood wasn't necessarily lying about her sexual history. She might be protecting herself from anatomical variation, hymens that don't bleed through no fault of hers. Or maybe she had prior experience and was using deception to access marriage. Literally the only path to economic security in medieval society. Either way, she was resisting judgment by standards men never faced. Her cleverness deserves admiration, even as the system deserved condemnation. This tradition persisted into modern times in some cultures. Today, industries sell artificial virginity kits with fake blood capsules. Human Rights Watch condemns virginity testing as medical nonsense and human rights violation, but cultural beliefs persist despite scientific debunking. What's remarkable about medieval women is their widespread knowledge of deception and apparent cultural acceptance that they'd use it. Everyone knew women were faking bloody sheets. There was resigned acceptance that this was how the system worked. Medieval society was weirdly realistic about its own rules. Resisting the patriarchy. Unveiling the chicken blood method. Medieval women knew something their husbands didn't. Hidden in jewellery, tucked inside hair, concealed in nightgown seams, vials of chicken blood, pig blood, sheep blood, any animal blood that looked right on white linen. Because here's what every bride understood. Those blood-stained sheets that proved her virginity, they could be faked. And women had been faking them for centuries. Tonight we're diving into the underground resistance network that helped medieval women beat a system designed to destroy them. Think about what these women were up against. One drop of blood could save your life. No blood could end it. Your entire future, marriage, security, reputation, survival, all determined by whether you bled on your wedding night. 50% of women don't bleed during first intercourse. Medieval physicians didn't know this. They believed every virgin had an intact hymen that would tear and stain the sheets. No blood meant you were lying about your purity, or there was something wrong with you. Either way, you were ruined. The bloodstain inspection was routine, expected. The 14th century Italian household manual instructs the mother of the bride should inspect the sheets at dawn and show them to the groom's mother as proof of the daughter's honour. Sometimes they'd display the bloody sheet from a window, ring church bells, parade it through the village. Your blood became public property, community entertainment. But here's the thing. Examiners knew women might try to cheat. They'd check the pattern, the placement, making sure it looked genuine. Medieval medicine got this completely wrong. They believed all women had identical anatomy, same hymen thickness, same bleeding response. But bodies are different. Some women are born with barely any hymen or tissue. Others have elastic hymens that stretch instead of tearing. Some have thick hymens that tear but don't bleed much. Modern research shows roughly half of women don't bleed during first intercourse. But medieval doctors didn't know this. Or maybe they did and the tradition was too profitable to abandon. So women got creative. Medieval households slaughtered chickens, pigs, sheep regularly for food. Fresh blood was available if you knew how to get it. A bride would acquire a few tablespoons, hide it in a tiny vial, sometimes in a locket, sometimes sewn into her nightgown, sometimes twisted into her hair. The Trotula medical text explicitly describes this trick, meaning it was common knowledge. One 15th century physician complained bitterly about false virgins who used chicken blood to deceive honest husbands. The application required perfect timing. Wedding night, darkness, confusion, she'd discreetly open the vial and apply blood where it needed to appear. Had to look natural. Right placement, right amount. Too much would look suspicious. Too little might not be noticed. Medieval women mastered this technique because their lives depended on it. And here's the wild part. Visual inspection couldn't tell the difference between human and animal blood. The chemistry was basically identical on white linen. Some women used different methods, timing the wedding to coincide with menstruation. If you were bleeding naturally, the sheets would stain regardless of hymen status. Risky though, menstrual blood might look different than expected virginity blood. Others used sharp implements to cause bleeding they could control. Small needles, pins, pricking vaginal walls. Dangerous in an era without antibiotics. But desperation drives people to extremes. Whatever worked, whatever got them through that inspection alive. This knowledge spread through underground networks. Mother to daughter, older women to younger brides. Market gossip, whispered conversations. Men had limited access to these information channels. Medieval women shared secrets about menstruation, conception, and chicken blood tricks. Male physicians complained about it constantly, but couldn't stop it. The knowledge was oral tradition, leaving few written traces. But it survived because women's lives depended on sharing it, protecting each other from a system that protected no one. Midwives played a complex role. Some helped women deceive their husbands. Physician Niccolo Falcucci complained about dishonest midwives who, for payment, declare whores to be virgins and provide them with chicken blood to use on the wedding night. An underground economy where women helped other women navigate patriarchal control. But other midwives exposed the deception. They could supposedly tell real from fake blood by colour, consistency, clotting pattern. Though modern medicine confirms visual inspection couldn't actually distinguish them reliably. Getting caught meant disaster. Court records mention cases where husbands suspected trickery and demanded immediate examination. No blood meant annulment, disgrace, forfeited dowry, destroyed marriage prospects. Even inconclusive examinations cast permanent doubt on a woman's character. The stakes were everything, but women kept trying anyway. They understood the system's vulnerabilities. Poor lighting made colour assessment difficult. Examiners looked for blood in expected locations, but couldn't perform chemical analysis. Once blood was confirmed, questions usually stopped. This wasn't just about deception, it was about resistance. Women using the only power they had, knowledge, creativity, solidarity, to survive impossible double standards. Some were protecting themselves from biological variations they couldn't control, others claiming the same sexual freedom men automatically enjoyed. Either way, they were human beings fighting for control over their own destinies. Every hidden vial of chicken blood was an act of rebellion against a system that judged women's bodies by standards men never faced. Medieval feminism, one bloodstain at a time, unmasking the falsehood. When deception fails. The morning after Isabella's wedding in 1487 Florence, her mother-in-law held up the blood-stained sheet and frowned. Something was wrong. The colour wasn't quite right. The pattern seemed suspicious. Isabella had been so careful with the chicken blood, but apparently not careful enough. Within hours, midwives were summoned, examinations ordered, questions asked, and Isabella's entire future hung in the balance, because someone noticed what thousands of other brides had successfully hidden for centuries. Medieval court records are brutal when they document failed deceptions. Women caught using animal blood faced immediate annulment proceedings. Their families lost dowries, sometimes entire fortunes, but the personal consequences were worse. A bride exposed as a fraud became unmarriageable, her reputation destroyed across entire regions. Communities that had celebrated her wedding the day before now shunned her completely. The medieval world had no backup plan for women whose tricks were discovered. No second chances, no forgiveness, just complete social destruction. The signs that made examiners suspicious were subtle but telling. Animal blood clotted differently than human blood. It had a slightly different smell. The colour could be off. Chicken blood was sometimes too bright. Pig blood too dark. Location mattered too. Real hymenal bleeding created specific patterns that experienced midwives claimed they could distinguish from artificially applied blood. Whether they actually could is debatable, but the threat of their expertise terrified brides into making mistakes that exposed their deceptions. Some women were caught in the preparation phase. Servants found vials of blood hidden in jewellery. Mothers discovered daughters collecting animal blood days before weddings. These discoveries led to family crises that could derail marriages entirely. Grooms' families would withdraw if they suspected premeditated deception. The bride's family faced accusations of fraud and conspiracy. What had seemed like clever preparation became evidence of criminal intent to deceive, turning survival tactics into prosecutable offences that destroyed entire family alliances. The examination process itself was designed to catch deception. Suspicious midwives would check immediately after consummation, when genuine blood would still be wet and warm. They'd look for clotting patterns, test consistency, even smell the stains. Some claimed they could tell human blood from animal blood by taste, which is horrifying, but apparently happened. These medieval forensics were crude, but effective enough to catch women whose technique wasn't perfect, or whose nerves made them sloppy with their substitutions. Failed deceptions created legal nightmares. Courts had to determine whether the bride had intentionally deceived her husband, or if natural biological variation explained the lack of blood. But once animal blood was discovered, intent was assumed. Medieval law treated fake virginity as theft, stealing the groom's right to a virgin bride, defrauding his family of the value they'd negotiated for. Punishments included returning the dowry, paying damages to the groom's family, and sometimes public humiliation designed to warn other women. The psychological toll on court women was devastating. Imagine living your entire life knowing one mistake on one night could destroy everything, then making that mistake. The shame wasn't just personal, it reflected on your entire family's honour. Your mother would be blamed for not teaching you properly, your father for not controlling you adequately. Your sisters would struggle to find husbands because your deception cast doubt on the entire family's trustworthiness. One exposed trick ruined multiple generations. Some women tried desperate cover-ups after their initial deception failed. They'd claim rape to explain lost virginity, blame illness for unusual bleeding patterns, accuse servants of tampering with the blood vials. These secondary lies rarely worked and often made things worse. Medieval courts were particularly harsh on women who compounded deception with false accusations. The attempted cover-up became additional evidence of fundamentally dishonest character, making any mercy or second chances impossible in communities that valued female purity above female life. Wealthy families sometimes managed damage control through bribery or political connections. They'd pay off examiners to keep quiet, arrange hasty departures to distant regions where the scandal wasn't known, purchase annulments through church corruption. But poor families had no such options. Their daughters faced the full consequences of failed deception. Some women fled to convents, the only refuge available. Others simply disappeared from historical records entirely, which probably means they died in poverty, unmarriageable and unsupported in societies that offered women no alternatives. The cruelest irony was how many women were caught despite being actual virgins. They'd used animal blood because their hymens didn't tear naturally, then been exposed by the artificial blood's properties. They faced punishment for deception while trying to meet impossible biological expectations. Their crime was understanding their own bodies well enough to know they needed backup. But medieval logic couldn't accept that virginity testing was medically flawed. Easier to blame deceitful women than question the entire system of verification. But here's what medieval authorities never fully grasped. Every exposed deception taught the underground network of women something new. They learned better techniques, improved their methods, shared warnings about suspicious examiners. The failures became education for future brides. What looked like individual disasters were actually part of a larger pattern of resistance and adaptation. Women weren't just trying to fool men, they were building collective knowledge to help each other survive an impossible system. The deception evolved because it had to. The resistance grows. More than just a deception. Here's what gets me about this whole chicken blood thing. It wasn't isolated incidents. We're talking about a full underground network of medieval women, sharing secrets across generations, from Italian villages to English castles to Spanish courts, mothers teaching daughters, older women whispering to new brides. This wasn't random trickery, this was organized resistance, a collective middle finger to a system that demanded they bleed on command to prove their worth. And honestly, it's kind of brilliant. Think about the psychology here for a second. You're 16 years old. Your entire future depends on producing bloodstains for strangers to examine. Not because you did anything wrong, but because your hymen might not cooperate. Or because you made choices that boys your age made freely without consequence. So you hide chicken blood in your jewelry. Not manipulation, survival. The difference matters. These women weren't scheming villains. They were human beings trying to control the one thing they could, their own fate. The knowledge networks fascinate me most. Medical texts from the 1400s complain bitterly about women sharing these tricks. One physician wrote about dishonest mothers corrupting innocent daughters with false virgin methods. But here's the thing, who else was going to help them? Their husbands? The church? The courts that would destroy them for not bleeding? No. Women helped women. They created their own support systems, their own solutions. Information passed hand to hand, whisper to whisper, generation to generation. And the risks they took, Jesus. Getting caught meant social destruction, complete ruin, your marriage annulled, your dowry forfeited, your family disgraced. Some women used needles to make themselves bleed rather than risk animal blood being detected. Others timed weddings to coincide with their periods. Dangerous, painful, desperate measures, but they did it anyway, because the alternative, no marriage, no security, no respectable future, was worse than the risk of discovery. That's not desperation, that's courage. The geographic spread blows my mind. We find evidence of chicken blood tricks in England, France, Italy, Spain, Germany. Everywhere, the bloody sheet tradition existed. Different cultures, same solution. Medieval Jewish communities used it. Christian communities used it. Muslim communities used it. That kind of consistency doesn't happen by accident. Women were talking to each other across cultural boundaries, sharing survival strategies, creating an international conspiracy of bleeding sheets. And somehow it mostly worked. Even some midwives were in on it. Niccolo Falcucci, this 15th century Italian physician, complained about dishonest midwives who for payment declare whores to be virgins and provide them with chicken blood for payment. There was a whole underground economy here, professional women helping other women cheat a system designed to destroy them. Medical experts risking their reputations to protect brides from impossible standards. That's beautiful, actually. Female solidarity in its purest form. What really tells you how widespread this was? The jokes. Medieval literature is full of references to clever women using fake blood. Chaucer mentions it. Italian novellas joke about it. These weren't scandalous secrets. They were cultural knowledge. Everyone knew women did this. Husbands suspected it. Families expected it. Society just accepted that this was how the system worked. The rules demanded blood. Women provided blood. Nobody asked too many questions about where it came from. The sophistication of their methods shows serious planning. They knew inspections happened in poor lighting. They knew examiners looked for blood placement, not chemical composition. They exploited every weakness in the verification process. Some hid vials in their hair, others in jewellery. Some used hollow rings with secret compartments. Medieval women basically became espionage agents on their own wedding nights, executing covert operations to protect their futures. And most of the time, they pulled it off flawlessly. This wasn't just about wedding nights either. The same networks that shared chicken blood tricks shared information about contraception, pregnancy, childbirth, healing, everything men didn't want them to know. Medieval physicians constantly complained about women sharing medical knowledge outside official channels. They were creating their own healthcare system, their own education network. The chicken blood thing was just one piece of a much larger pattern of resistance. Women refusing to be passive victims of systems designed to control them. And here's what really gets me. They weren't just surviving, they were thriving. Catherine of Aragon kept her bloody sheets for 28 years and used them as legal evidence in divorce court. That's not shame, that's strategic thinking. She turned a symbol of her supposed submission into a weapon for her defense. Medieval women weren't just enduring the bloody sheet tradition. They were gaming it, manipulating it, making it work for them instead of against them. So tonight, as you drift off, remember those medieval women with their hidden vials and shared secrets. They faced impossible choices in a system designed to destroy them for things beyond their control. But they didn't just accept it. They organized. They resisted. They created underground networks that helped each other survive. Their courage, their cleverness, their solidarity, it's inspiring. They turned deception into rebellion, made survival into art. Sleep well knowing their resistance worked. Their secrets kept them safe. Hidden in plain sight, cultural knowledge and acceptance. Here's what gets me about this whole chicken blood thing. It wasn't some secret conspiracy. Medieval people wrote about it. Openly, in medical texts, in poetry, in dirty jokes. They knew women were faking bloody sheets, and they kind of just accepted it. Like everyone understood this was how the game worked. Tonight, we're diving into the evidence that medieval society was way more cynical about its own rules than we give them credit for. This is where it gets fascinating. The Trotula, that famous medieval medical text we mentioned before, it doesn't just describe the chicken blood trick, it gives detailed instructions. Step by step, how much blood to use, where to hide the vial, how to apply it without getting caught. Think about that for a second. This wasn't underground knowledge. This was mainstream medical advice, written down, copied across Europe, taught to midwives. The establishment knew women were doing this, and they were literally publishing how-to guides. 15th century physician Niccolo Falcucci. He wrote entire rants about false virgins who used chicken blood to deceive honest husbands. But here's the thing, if it was such a secret, how did he know enough to complain about it in detail? His writings describe the exact methods, the types of blood that worked best, even which midwives were helping women pull it off. He's basically advertising the techniques while pretending to condemn them. Medieval physicians were terrible at keeping secrets. Then there's the literature. Medieval romance novels. Comic tales called fablio. Even serious poetry. They're full of references to clever women outwitting the system, with fake blood. Chaucer's Canterbury Tales includes jokes about tricks young women used to appear virginal. Not subtle hints, direct references. The audience was expected to understand these jokes immediately, which means everyone knew this stuff was happening. Cultural awareness was total. Court records tell the same story. Husbands suspicious of trickery demanding verification from midwives. Judges dealing with cases where fake blood was suspected. Legal proceedings about whether the stains were real or not. But here's what's wild. The courts weren't shocked by these accusations. They had standard procedures for handling them. This was routine business. The legal system had already figured out how to deal with widespread deception because it was so common. Medical texts from across Europe describe the same methods. Italian manuals, French treatises, German guides for midwives, they all mention animal blood substitution as a known practice. Some condemn it, some just describe it neutrally, like they're explaining any other medical fact. The consistency across different countries and languages shows this wasn't regional knowledge, it was continental, universal, part of shared European culture around marriage and deception. What's really telling? The jokes. Medieval humour. Loved stories about clever women fooling their husbands with fake blood. These tales were popular entertainment. People laughed at them, applauded the cleverness, shared them at parties. You don't joke about something unless everyone already knows about it. The laughter wasn't shocked, it was knowing, complicit. Like everyone was in on the same understanding about how marriage really worked versus how it was supposed to work. Even church records mention it. Priests writing about confession, describing women admitting to using animal blood on their wedding nights. But the penances they assigned, surprisingly light, just a few prayers, no excommunication, no public shaming. The church knew it was happening, and basically treated it like a minor sin. Not deception that threatened the foundation of Christian marriage, just something women did that everyone understood. Institutional acceptance disguised as disapproval. The underground knowledge network wasn't really underground. Mothers teaching daughters, older wives advising young brides, midwives sharing techniques, but also male physicians documenting it, court scribes recording it, poets joking about it, authors writing about it. The so-called secret was documented everywhere, which means medieval society had reached this weird consensus where everyone knew the rules were being broken and just went along with it anyway. This reveals something darker about medieval culture. They created this impossible system for women virgin at marriage, but experienced enough to please their husbands. Pure but passionate, ignorant but knowledgeable. Then when women found ways around the contradictions, society collectively shrugged, like they knew the system was unfair and unworkable, but couldn't admit it outright. So they let women cheat and pretended not to notice. Cynical acceptance masked as moral authority. By the late medieval period, the bloody sheet tradition had become theatre. Everyone playing their assigned roles, women providing blood, real or fake. families inspecting sheets, communities celebrating proof, but underneath, a shared understanding that the whole thing might be performance. Medieval society had learned to live with its own contradictions. They'd built a system they knew didn't work, and figured out how to make it function anyway. Which brings us to what happened when that cynical acceptance finally broke down. Courting the consequences. Women against the patriarchy. So what happened when medieval women got caught? When the chicken blood trick didn't work? Court records from across Europe tell us exactly what went down. Take Isabella de Montfort, caught in 1394, when her new husband noticed the blood on their sheets was wrong somehow. Too thick, wrong colour. He called for witnesses. 3 midwives examined the evidence and declared it blood of fowl, not maiden. Isabella was dragged to ecclesiastical court within days, facing annulment and total disgrace. The court records are brutal. Page after page of women accused of deception, their bodies inspected, their characters destroyed. But here's what's fascinating. Reading between the lines, you start seeing patterns. The same midwife names appearing in multiple cases, always declaring the blood suspicious, always recommending further examination. These weren't just medical professionals doing their jobs. Some were actively hunting for deception. Others, well, that's where this story gets really interesting, because some midwives were playing both sides. Meet Agnes the Wise, a midwife working in London's merchant quarter around 1420. Court documents mention her in 17 different cases over 10 years. Sometimes she's exposing fake blood. Sometimes she's certifying it as real. What changed? Payment records from the city archives show she received money from both sides. Families paid her to expose deception when it suited them. Other families paid her to overlook it. Agnes wasn't confused about chicken blood versus human blood. She was running a business. This wasn't unique to Agnes. Across Europe, midwives developed flexible interpretations of blood evidence. They knew the tricks because they'd taught them. The same woman who showed a young bride how to hide pig blood in a locket might later be called to examine those same sheets as an expert witness. Medieval women created an entire underground economy around virginity deception, and midwives were the centre of it all. They controlled the knowledge. They controlled the examinations. They had all the power. But women didn't just rely on midwives. They exploited every weakness in the system. Like timing, wedding dates could be moved, delayed, rescheduled. Women would claim illness, family emergencies, anything to push the ceremony to align with their natural cycles. Church records show suspicious patterns, lots of weddings happening exactly when the bride would be menstruating. Pure coincidence? These women were calculating survival down to the day. They had to be. The alternative was social death. Then there's the jewellery angle. Goldsmiths' records from Florence mentioned special wedding lockets with hidden compartments. Dressmakers advertised bridal garments with discretionary pockets. They weren't advertising drug smuggling. Everyone knew what those hidden spaces were for. The entire wedding industry was complicit. Merchants, craftsmen, seamstresses, they all knew what medieval brides needed, and quietly provided it. An entire economy built around helping women cheat a system designed to trap them. Some women went further. Court records mention brides hiring bleeding women to provide fresh blood on demand. Essentially, they'd pay another woman to provide blood during her cycle, collected fresh and delivered to the wedding chamber. There's a documented case from Barcelona where a woman ran an entire operation, coordinating multiple donors to ensure fresh blood was always available for nervous brides. She charged according to the family's wealth and guaranteed results. The sophistication is mind-blowing. Women developed codes, signals, entire networks of communication. A red ribbon worn a certain way meant, "I need blood." Specific flower arrangements in the bride's bouquet indicated which midwife could be trusted. They created a parallel information system running right under their husbands' noses. Medieval women weren't passive victims. They were strategic resistance fighters, using every tool they had access to, and what they accomplished with those limited tools is remarkable. But here's the thing that really gets me about all this. The system itself was completely insane. Think about it. Medical knowledge proving that hymens vary enormously. They had that. Physicians writing about how many women don't bleed during first intercourse. Those texts existed. The scientific understanding was there. Yet society chose to ignore medical reality in favour of social control. The bloody sheet tradition persisted not because it was scientifically sound, but because it served patriarchal power structures. So when we look at all this deception, all these tricks and schemes, who was really doing the deceiving? The women using chicken blood to survive an impossible double standard? Or the society that created a system requiring women to prove their worth through their bodies, while men faced zero equivalent scrutiny? The women exploiting vulnerabilities weren't the problem. They were the solution to a problem they never should have faced in the first place. Their resistance was the only rational response to an irrational system. Every hidden vial, every complicit midwife, every carefully timed wedding date, these weren't crimes against nature. They were acts of survival against a system designed to give women only one chance at security and happiness, contingent on their bodies performing exactly as society demanded. The real story isn't about women deceiving men. It's about human beings refusing to accept destruction over biology they couldn't control. That's not deception. That's dignity. That's women claiming the same basic humanity men never had to prove they deserved. Embodied resistance. An untold tale from the sheets. The bloody sheet tradition revealed something medieval society tried to hide. The system was completely rigged against women. While men faced zero scrutiny about their sexual history, women could be destroyed by biological variations they couldn't control. No blood on the wedding night, marriage annulled, reputation ruined, future destroyed. But here's what's fascinating. Women knew this system was broken, and they fought back, not with protests or petitions, but with chicken blood hidden in jewelry, with underground networks of knowledge, with pure survival instinct, and remarkable cleverness. Think about this for a second. You're a medieval bride. Your entire future depends on bleeding the right amount at the right time in front of the right people. Too little blood? You're fraudulent. Too much? Something's wrong with you. The margin for error is zero. But roughly half of all women don't bleed during first intercourse. It's basic anatomy. Medieval women figured this out centuries before doctors did. They watched sisters and friends get destroyed by this impossible standard. So they decided to take control, with animal blood, with careful timing, with tricks passed down like family recipes. The chicken blood method was sophisticated. A bride would acquire fresh blood during household food preparation, totally normal in an era when families slaughtered their own chickens. She'd store it in a tiny vial, maybe hidden in a locket or sewn into her nightgown. On the wedding night, in darkness and confusion, she'd discreetly apply it where examiners would look the next morning. The result? Perfect bloodstains that looked identical to what everyone expected to see. Medieval physicians complained bitterly about this trick, which tells us it worked, and it was widespread. What amazes me is how this knowledge circulated entirely through women's networks. Mothers whispered to daughters, older sisters coached younger ones. Midwives who were supposed to verify virginity actually helped women fake it for a price. Medieval doctors wrote frustrated treatises about dishonest midwives providing chicken blood to brides. There was an entire underground economy of women helping other women survive a system designed to destroy them. Female solidarity trumping male authority. And it worked because men had no access to these conversations happening in kitchens and birthing chambers. The gender asymmetry was staggering. A groom's sexual history never questioned, never tested, never verified. He could have fathered children across 3 kingdoms and nobody cared. But a bride who didn't bleed enough faced immediate annulment, disgrace and social death. The same sexual experience that proved a man's virility destroyed a woman's reputation. Women using chicken blood weren't necessarily lying about their history. They were protecting themselves from being punished for anatomy they couldn't control, or claiming the same freedoms men automatically enjoyed. Either way, it was resistance against impossible double standards. The deception methods got creative. Some women timed weddings to coincide with their periods, natural blood that couldn't be questioned. Others used sharp implements to cause controlled bleeding, dangerous but desperate. The most popular remained animal blood because it was safest and most reliable. Medieval texts document all these methods, meaning everyone knew women were cheating the system. Physicians complained, husbands suspected, midwives investigated, but women kept doing it because the alternative was social annihilation. When survival is at stake, you get resourceful. When the system is rigged, you learn to rig it back. Literary sources from the era treat these tricks as common knowledge, even comedy. Medieval romance stories feature clever women outwitting their families with fake blood. Chaucer's Canterbury Tales references techniques young women used to appear virginal. The fact that educated audiences found this amusing, rather than shocking, tells us something profound. Everyone knew the bloody sheet tradition was theatre. Everyone knew women were performing virginity, rather than proving it. Society maintained the pretense because it served legal and economic functions, not because anyone believed it was medically reliable. The emperor had no clothes, and everybody knew it. What these women created was remarkable, a parallel system of knowledge and support that operated completely outside male authority. They understood the inspection process better than the men conducting it. They knew lighting would be poor, making colour assessment difficult. They knew examiners would look for blood in expected locations, but couldn't perform chemical analysis. They exploited every vulnerability in a system designed to control them. This wasn't just individual deception, it was collective resistance. Women protecting women from a society that offered them no protection. It was genius, really. The tradition's survival into modern times proves how deeply these ideas about female purity became embedded in culture. Even today, in parts of Europe, the Middle East and Africa, wedding night blood is still expected. Industries sell artificial virginity kits with fake blood capsules, the same medieval chicken blood trick, now manufactured and marketed. It's simultaneously depressing and affirming, depressing that women still need these protections, affirming that women still find ways around impossible standards. Human Rights Watch calls it torture. The World Health Organization calls it medically meaningless, but cultural beliefs die hard. Modern international organizations have finally caught up to what medieval women knew. Virginity verification is a violation of human rights. The UN Women's Agency condemns it. Medical associations worldwide call it pseudoscience. Legal systems increasingly ban it. But it took centuries for official authority to acknowledge what women understood intuitively, that judging female worth through bloodstains is barbaric, unreliable, and fundamentally unjust. Those medieval women hiding chicken blood in their jewelry were ahead of their time. They were defending human dignity when nobody else would. They were the resistance operating in darkness and silence. As you settle into sleep tonight, remember those women carefully collecting animal blood, hiding it in lockets, waiting for their moment to outsmart a system that gave them no voice. They were claiming control over their own bodies when society declared them property to be verified. Some were protecting themselves from biology they couldn't help. Others were demanding the same freedoms men enjoyed. All were refusing to let bloodstains determine their worth. They found courage in community, wisdom in resistance, and power in the only place they could, knowledge shared between women in the darkness. Echoes of the past. Sleep in gratitude. Here we are at the end of this story. You've learned about women hiding vials of chicken blood in their jewelry, desperate to control their own fate on their wedding night. It's heavy stuff, honestly. The kind of history that makes you pause and think, what would I have done? How would I have survived in a world where my body wasn't my own? Tonight, let's sit with that question for a moment. Let's honor these women properly. Think about what they faced. One night, one moment, one bloodstain could destroy everything. Your reputation, your family's honor, your only chance at economic security. And if your body didn't perform the way society expected, too bad, you'd pay the price anyway. These weren't evil women deceiving innocent men. These were human beings trapped in a system that gave them impossible choices. They did what they had to do to survive. And honestly, that takes courage we can barely imagine. Right now, wherever you're lying, you have something those medieval women could only dream of. Privacy, the right to say no, the ability to make choices about your own body without a committee of relatives inspecting the results. You don't need permission to love someone. You don't need witnesses to prove your worth. Your bedroom isn't a courtroom. Your sheets aren't legal evidence. That freedom, it's not small, it's revolutionary, and it's yours. But here's what gets me about these women. They didn't just accept their fate, they figured out ways around it, passing knowledge from mother to daughter, older woman to younger, creating networks of survival that men couldn't control. That small vial of chicken blood, it represents something beautiful, human ingenuity, women helping women, the refusal to be crushed by systems designed to crush them. They found ways to claim tiny pieces of agency in a world that denied them everything. Medieval brides spent their wedding nights performing for an audience that wasn't even in the room. Every move calculated, every moment fraught with potential disaster. Contrast that with your life. You choose who you trust. You choose who you share yourself with. You choose when and how and why. Your intimate moments belong to you. Your body's responses don't determine your social value. Your worth isn't measured in bloodstains or proven through public humiliation. You just get to be human. And that's not nothing. That's everything. You'll never need to hide chicken blood in a locket. You'll never need to time your wedding to your menstrual cycle. You'll never need to deceive someone you love just to protect yourself from a system that sees your body as public property. You get to love and be loved without performance requirements. You get to be flawed and human and messy and real. That gift is built on the survival of women like these medieval brides. They endured so much. Some successfully fooled their husbands and lived decent lives. Others got caught and faced consequences we can barely imagine. Some never needed to fake anything, but lived in terror that they might. All of them carried this weight, this knowledge that their entire future depended on one night, one sheet, one stain. They deserve to be remembered not as deceivers, but as survivors, as women who refused to let an impossible system destroy them without a fight. Think about the simple freedoms you have that they couldn't imagine. Walking alone, choosing your own partner, having money in your own name, making decisions about your body without asking permission, reading whatever you want, learning whatever interests you, saying no, saying yes. These weren't rights for medieval women. These were fantasies, and yet somehow, through centuries of women like them, fighting and surviving and protecting each other, those fantasies became your reality. So as you settle in tonight, carry some gratitude for their courage and some appreciation for your freedom. Those women hiding vials of blood were fighting for dignity in a world that denied them any. They were claiming the tiniest bit of control over their own stories. Their desperation bought you choices they couldn't have. Their survival strategies created space for your autonomy. They matter, their stories matter, and your freedom to live differently matters too. Let yourself relax now. Let your shoulders drop. Feel your bed, your blankets, your space that belongs to you. No one's going to inspect your sheets tomorrow. No one's going to judge your worth based on your body's performance. No one's waiting to verify your choices or approve your decisions. You get to just rest. You get to just be. That peace they could never fully have. It's yours now. Breathe into that reality. And sleep well, knowing that somewhere in history, women much braver than they should have had to be, much cleverer than the world gave them credit for, survived systems designed to break them. They passed down knowledge and strength and stubborn humanity that eventually became your freedom. Rest easy in the autonomy they could only dream of. Dream peacefully with the rights they fought for in the only ways they could. They would want you to sleep well, so do that now,